She arrived in the new town on a cloudy afternoon, watching the houses pass by through the car window like quiet faces she did not know yet. Her mother tried to talk to her about simple things, like where the grocery store was and how the school looked bigger than the old one, but the girl mostly nodded and smiled. Inside, she felt a mix of hope and worry. A new place meant a chance to start again. It also meant being the new kid, the one everyone looked at for a few seconds too long. Her name was Amara, and she had learned early in life how to hold herself calm when everything around her felt strange. She carried that calm with her now, like a soft jacket wrapped tight around her shoulders. When they reached the small apartment, she helped carry boxes without complaint. The stairway smelled faintly of cleaning soap and old wood. It was not perfect, but it was theirs. Her mother hugged her and said they would make it feel like home soon. That first night, Amara unpacked slowly. She placed her books in neat rows. She found room for a small trophy from a school competition back in her old town. And on the top shelf, she set a simple black belt folded with care, the fabric worn at the edges from years of training. She did not think of it as something to show off. To her, it was like a quiet memory of early mornings, hard practice, and an instructor who always said the same thing. Strength is not loud. It listens first. School started 2 days later. The building felt huge as she walked toward it, her backpack slightly too heavy on her shoulders. It was early, but groups of students already filled the steps and the courtyard. They laughed, talked fast, and seemed to know where to go without thinking. Amara walked with steady steps, trying not to rush or hesitate. She told herself that every person there had been new once, even if it was long ago. Inside, the hallways buzzed with noise. Lockers opening, shoes squeaking, voices rising and falling like waves. She checked the paper with her schedule again, even though she already knew it by heart. First class on the left, second on the third floor. She took a deep breath and kept moving. In her first class, people noticed her the way they always do with someone new. Some smiled politely. Some stared for a second and then turned back to their friends. The teacher introduced her, and Amara gave a small nod. She spoke clearly when asked where she had moved from, but she did not add more than that. She was careful with her words, like placing fragile objects on a table. She did not want to seem shy, but she also did not want to push herself into the center. At lunch, she sat at the end of a long table. It was not lonely exactly, but it was quiet. She ate slowly, watching the way patterns form in a place like this. She saw the loud group that made everyone laugh. She saw the quiet ones reading while they ate. She saw friends who had probably known each other since they were small children. She wondered which group she might fit into one day. There were also a few who noticed her a little differently. They didn't say much at first. They just watched, whispering to each other sometimes. Amara felt it the way people feel a sudden change in the air before rain. She kept calm. She had been taught to do that. Breathe in, breathe out, do not rush toward fear or away from it. After school, she walked home with her headphones in but no music playing. She liked the simple sound of her steps on the sidewalk. She passed a park, a library, and a bakery that let the warm smell of bread drift out the door. All of it felt new, but also like it could one day be familiar. That evening, her mother asked how the first day went. Amara said it was fine, and she meant it. There had been no big problems, only the usual small awkward moments. She helped cook dinner, washed the dishes, and then went to her room. On the floor, she spread out a thin mat and practiced a few slow movements. Nothing fast, nothing hard. Just slow, mindful steps and steady breathing. It helped her feel centered again, like placing both feet on the ground after standing on a boat. The days that followed were much the same, but small changes began to appear. In class, she answered a question and the teacher smiled in approval. In the hallway, one girl asked where she bought her backpack, and they shared a small laugh. These moments were like tiny seeds of friendship. She knew they might grow if she was patient. There were also moments that felt less kind. A few students sometimes moved aside just a little too slowly when she walked past. Once, she heard a soft laugh behind her for no clear reason. She did not react. She kept her face gentle and calm, even when her stomach twisted a bit. She told herself that people often act out of confusion, not cruelty, and that maybe they simply did not know her yet. She spent time in the library during breaks, finding comfort in the quiet rows of books. The librarian, an older woman with kind eyes, spoke to her warmly and soon remembered her name. That small kindness mattered more than it might have seemed. It made the school feel less like a maze and more like a place with safe corners. At night, Amara sometimes missed her old friends. She missed the way they understood her jokes without needing long explanations. But she did not let sadness sit too long. She wrote in a small notebook, listing 3 good things from each day. Sometimes they were very small, like the sky looked pretty at sunset. But they helped. Her martial arts training stayed mostly in the background of her life here. She did not tell people about it. It was not a secret, only private. To her, it was more about discipline than anything else. She remembered the calm voice of her instructor. A strong person is like still water, quiet on the surface, deep underneath. She carried that idea with her into the crowded hallways. Over time, the same few students who had watched her from afar began to test small boundaries. They would block part of a path and then laugh when she stepped around them. Comment here, a whisper there. None of it loud. None of it obvious. It was like a slow drip of cold water. She noticed, but she chose patience. She did not want trouble. She believed that kindness and calm could be stronger than sharp words. Still, the feeling of being watched never fully left her. She paid attention. She kept her steps steady and her expression soft. If her heart sped up sometimes, no one could tell. She remembered to breathe. She remembered who she was. Her teachers began to see her as a hard-working student. One of them asked if she might like to join a study group after school. Another suggested she sign up for a small writing contest. These invitations felt like gentle doors opening. She thanked them and said she would think about it. She wanted to choose her steps with care. At home, life stayed simple. Dinner, homework, a bit of quiet practice on the mat. Her mother worked long hours but always tried to ask about her day. They laughed together sometimes about small things, like the cat that liked to climb onto their window ledge and stare inside as if judging their cooking. Through all of this, Amara kept one clear promise to herself. She would not let fear or anger shape her. If others chose unkindness, she would not match it. She would hold her ground without being harsh. This was not weakness. It was a strength she had learned through many years of discipline. And yet, deep inside, she also knew she would not allow anyone to harm her. Not because she wanted to fight, but because she respected herself. That respect was steady and calm, like a light that does not flicker in the wind. So the days stretched on, filled with small victories and quiet challenges. The school began to feel slightly less strange. Faces became familiar. Names slowly attached themselves to those faces. And though a few eyes still watched her with curiosity, and sometimes with something less friendly, she moved through each day with quiet grace. She did not know yet how those small glances and whispers would grow into something larger. She did not know that some people, still unsure and restless in their own lives, would choose her as an easy target. She only knew that she would face whatever came with the same calm heart she carried into every new room. For now, it was enough simply to arrive each morning, walk through the doors, and learn the rhythm of this new place. Step by step, breath by breath, quiet strength beneath a gentle surface. The weeks passed slowly, like pages turning in a long book, and the new school began to show more of its true shape to Amara. At first, everything had been surface level. New faces, busy hallways, polite smiles. But as time went on, she started to notice the quiet lines between people. Who walked with who sat where, who spoke loudly and who almost never spoke at all. Amara kept to herself without being unfriendly. She answered when people spoke to her. She thanked others when they helped. She tried to stay open but also careful. Being the new person meant she was still learning the rules that no one ever said out loud. There was a small group of students who always seemed to be watching, like they had nothing better to do than observe what others wore, how they talked, and where they sat. They were not openly mean. Not at first. It was more like they were waiting for something to judge. Amara noticed the way they sometimes whispered when she passed. their eyes following her for a little too long. She did not give them a reaction. She had been taught that her calm was her anchor. So she kept walking with steady steps, carrying that quiet strength like a lantern only she could see. But small things began to happen. One afternoon, she went to her locker and found it a little harder to open than usual. It stuck as if something was caught in the hinge. She tried again, and it finally clicked open with a soft metal sound. A pair of students standing nearby laughed at something right then, looking over with quick sideways glances. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe not. Amara decided to give them the benefit of the doubt. She believed in seeing the good first, even when the bad seemed easier to notice. Another day, as she walked down the hall, someone slowed down in front of her on purpose. The person didn't move aside, just drifted along as if blocking the path was a game. Amara simply stepped gently around and kept going. She did not glare. She did not sigh. She refused to feed any small spark that might turn into something worse. Still, she felt it. That invisible line between curiosity and unkindness. It was thin, and some people walked it every day. In class, Amara did well. She listened carefully, took neat notes, and answered when the teacher called on her. A few classmates began to respect her for that. One boy asked if she could help him understand a history question. A quiet girl in the back row complimented her handwriting. These moments gave warmth to her day, small reminders that not everyone looked at her through a narrow lens. But the group that watched her did not disappear. If anything, they paid more attention. It was as if they were testing the edges of her patience, pushing just hard enough to see if she would finally react. They whispered loudly enough that she could hear the rhythm of their voices, even if she could not catch every word. Sometimes, when she walked into a room, the air felt a little tighter for a few seconds. Amara handled it in the same way she handled everything else, with steady breath and quiet thought. She told herself, not everyone will like you, and that is okay. But she also reminded herself of something even more important. You still get to choose who you are. After school, she sometimes went to the library or stopped by the park before heading home. The trees there had tall, soft-looking leaves that moved gently in the wind, like slow waves. Sitting under them helped her reset. The noise of the school faded, replaced by the simple sound of wind, distant traffic, and the occasional bird. She would close her eyes and breathe in deeply, feeling the ground under her shoes as if it were steadying her. Her mother noticed when Amara came home quieter than usual. She didn't pry, but she did cook with a little more care, adding spices that filled the whole apartment with warm smells. And sometimes, she reached out and squeezed Amara's hand for no reason at all. Those small gestures said what words didn't need to. At night, Amara kept practicing the calm discipline she had trained with for years. Slow movements, soft breathing, a focus on balance. She did it not because she expected trouble, but because it helped her stay grounded. It reminded her that her body and mind belonged to her, no matter what others thought. As the weeks went on, the quiet tests from the group increased in tiny, almost invisible ways. Sometimes, there would be a sudden hush when she walked past, like her presence paused their conversation. Then, after a moment, soft laughter would follow. Other times, someone would say something just loud enough to sound like a joke, but vague enough that she could not respond without seeming overly sensitive. It was a subtle kind of pressure, and it wore on her more than she liked to admit. Amara did not hate them. She did not even feel angry most of the time. What she felt was tired. Tired of being watched. Tired of walking into rooms and feeling like a question no one wanted to answer in a kind way. Yet she never forgot who she was. She greeted the teachers politely. She helped a younger student find a classroom one day. She even offered to pick up papers that someone had dropped in the hallway, receiving a surprised thank you in return. These moments mattered. They reminded her that kindness still had a place here, even if it sometimes felt like it was hiding. The guidance counselor once visited her class to talk about respect and how everyone deserved to feel safe at school. Amara listened closely. She wondered if the counselor somehow knew about the small things happening in the hallways. So no one said anything. The world often notices late, she thought. But better late than never. There were times Amara considered speaking up. Maybe to a teacher. maybe to her mother. But each time she thought about it, she hesitated. What would she say? That people looked at her strangely? That they whispered sometimes? It all felt so easy to dismiss. She did not want to seem like she was complaining over nothing, and part of her still hoped that the attention would fade if she continued to remain calm. So she built her life around quiet routines. She arrived at school a few minutes early to avoid crowded hallways. She sat where she could see the board clearly but not draw attention. She carried a small notebook where she wrote things that helped her stay positive. Short quotes, reminders, even simple sentences like, "You are allowed to be here." One afternoon in the cafeteria, a few students from the watching group sat near her. They did not speak to her directly, but their laughter kept rising and falling like a wave. Amara kept eating, keeping her posture soft but upright. She did not give in to the urge to shrink or disappear. She had worked too hard on herself to go back to being small. Inside, she talked to herself in the same calm voice her old instructor had used. "You are safe. You are steady. You choose kindness, but you also choose self-respect." Those words were like a shield you couldn't see, but could still feel. Slowly, a few classmates began to notice the situation. Not in a loud way, just small looks of concern when they saw the group watching her again. A couple of times, someone sat a little closer to Amara, almost like quiet support. She appreciated it even if no one spoke about it directly. The days were not all heavy. There were light moments too. A teacher shared a funny story from childhood and the whole class laughed together. In art, Amara painted a soft scene of mountains and a river, and the teacher pinned it on the wall. She even found herself smiling at a silly joke told by a boy who always seemed to be in a good mood. These small good moments helped balance the weight of the uneasy ones. They reminded her that life was rarely all one thing or another. It was a mixture, like rain and sunlight sharing the same sky. But the group still watched. Sometimes their eyes held curiosity. Other times something a little harder to read. Maybe confusion. Maybe jealousy. Maybe just boredom. People sometimes act out when they don't know what to do with their own feelings. Amara understood that, even as it made her days more complicated. She never let her thoughts drift toward harshness. She refused to label anyone as bad. She believed that actions mattered more than labels, and actions could change. At least she hoped so. In quiet moments at home, she talked to herself kindly. "You are doing your best. You are not alone even if it feels like it." She held on to that truth tightly, the way a traveler holds a map in an unknown land. Soon, the small tests would begin to grow, stretching beyond whispers and slow steps in the hallway. But for now, the tension lived in the in-between spaces. The glances, the stifled laughter, the unspoken words that floated in the air like tiny clouds. Amara kept walking forward anyway, not with loud bravery, not with dramatic speeches, but with quiet, steady courage, the kind that shows itself most clearly on ordinary days, in ordinary hallways, when no one is cheering and no music is playing. The change came slowly at first, the way clouds gather before rain. Most days at school still felt normal enough. There were lessons and small jokes and the quiet comfort of books in the library. But the uneasy looks and whispered words kept building, like a low sound in the background that never fully stopped. Amara noticed it even when she tried not to. She kept walking with the same steady steps, but inside she had to work a little harder to stay calm. One morning, as she arrived at school, the air felt different. It was hard to explain. The building looked the same, the sky had the same soft gray color, and students still filled the steps with chatter and backpacks and half-finished conversations. But something inside her told her to pay attention. She had learned to trust that soft voice. It had helped her stay balanced many times before. In her first classes, nothing unusual happened. She answered a question in science. She took notes, drew a small diagram, and listened carefully. Still, that feeling stayed with her, as if the day itself was holding its breath. At lunch, she chose a table near the corner. Not too hidden, not too exposed. She liked this spot because she could see most of the room. Some students walked by without noticing her at all. A few gave a small nod or smile. And then there were the others, the ones whose attention always felt heavier than simple curiosity. They sat a few tables away, talking in low voices. Every now and then one of them looked over. Not for long. Just a glance that slipped away too quickly. Amara kept her gaze gentle and focused on her food. She did not want to invite trouble. She had never looked for it. But she had also learned to stay aware. Awareness, she knew, was not the same thing as fear. It was simply paying attention to the world around you. The afternoon passed. In the last class of the day, the teacher reminded everyone about an upcoming project. People groaned and laughed at the same time. When the bell rang, the hallway filled with the usual rush of voices and footsteps. Amara took her time packing up. She liked giving the traffic a moment to thin out before she walked into the flow of students. As she stepped into the hallway, she saw the same group again. They weren't doing anything yet, just leaning against lockers, talking. But the feeling in the air tightened once more. She walked past calmly, her shoulders relaxed, her face soft. She did not hurry. She did not slow down either. She was simply present, like a tree that stays steady in the wind. Outside, the late afternoon light lay across the pavement in long lines. Most students headed straight for buses, bikes, or cars. Amara sometimes walked home, especially on days when the weather felt kind. Today she decided to take the quieter path, the one that curved past the side of the school and toward the park. She heard footsteps behind her. More than one pair. They did not rush. They simply followed at a steady pace. Amara did not turn around right away. Instead, she listened. Listening was one of the first things she had been taught. Notice your surroundings. Stay grounded. Breathe. When she finally did glance back, she saw them. The same small group from school. Their expressions were mixed. Some looked unsure. One looked like they were trying to seem confident. The air between them and Amara filled with unspoken words. She stopped walking and turned to face them. Not in challenge, but in calm acknowledgement. There was open space around them. No crowds. Only the quiet sound of the breeze passing through the nearby trees. For a moment no one spoke. It was as if they were waiting for her to react first. Amara let the silence sit there. She kept her hands relaxed by her sides. Her feet were steady under her, not braced for anything, just firmly placed on the ground. Finally, one of them said something about her being quiet and acting like she was better than everyone else. The words tumbled out, sounding more confused than cruel. Another added a few more comments, trying to make their voice sound bold. But underneath, she could hear it. Uncertainty, maybe even insecurity. Amara took a slow breath. She did not raise her voice. She did not lecture them either. She simply said, "I don't think I'm better than anyone. I'm just trying to learn. I'm trying to be myself here." They shifted a little, as if that answer did not line up with whatever story they had created about her. One of them stepped a bit closer, not aggressively, just closing the space like someone testing a boundary. Amara remembered her training. The first rule was always respect. The second was to stay safe. Safety did not mean hurting someone. It meant knowing your space, knowing your limits, and honoring both. So she took a half step back, calm and natural, keeping a comfortable distance. She raised her hands slightly, open and relaxed, not as shields, but as a clear sign that she wanted peace. Her voice stayed soft. "I don't want any problems," she said. "If something I did upset you, we can talk. But I won't argue or fight." Those words surprised them. You could see it in the small changes on their faces. They had expected something else maybe. Silence, anger, fear. Instead, they found calm, and calm can be disarming in its own gentle way. Still, one of them tried to act tough again, saying they had seen the way she walked around, like she didn't care what others thought. And this time Amara nodded. "You're right," she said. "I try not to let unkind things change me. But that doesn't mean I don't care. It just means I choose how to react." There was honesty in her voice. It wasn't sharp. It wasn't defensive. It was simply true. Another small shift in the air. A couple of students from nearby had paused on the path, sensing the tension. They did not come close, but their presence added another layer to the moment. It was no longer a private bubble of uncertainty. It had witnesses now, and sometimes witnesses make people see themselves more clearly. The group seemed stuck between two paths. Continue pushing, or step back and let the moment soften. You could almost see the thoughts moving behind their eyes, like birds fluttering inside a cage. Amara stayed still but not rigid. Her breathing was steady. Inside, she reminded herself of something important. She did not have to prove anything. Not her strength. Not her calm. Not her worth. She only needed to stay true to herself. So when one of them took a small step toward her again, she simply shifted her position slightly, creating safe space once more without making it dramatic. Her voice was gentle but clear. Please don't come closer. I'm comfortable where I am. Those words were simple, but they mattered. They were a boundary spoken with kindness, not anger. The group hesitated. Someone let out a small nervous laugh, the kind people use when they don't know what else to do. Another looked away toward the trees, as if suddenly noticing how open and bright the afternoon was. And then, slowly, the moment loosened. They muttered a few last words that did not carry much weight anymore, and one by one, they turned to leave. It wasn't dramatic. There was no scene, just a quiet retreat, like a wave that had reached the shore and decided not to rush any farther. The students who had been watching from a distance relaxed too. One of them offered Amara a small, supportive smile before walking away. It was tiny, but it mattered. Said, I saw what happened, and I respect how you handled it. Amara stood there for a moment, letting the tension drain from her body. She didn't collapse or sigh. She simply allowed herself to feel the steadiness of the ground beneath her shoes. Then she continued her walk home, step by step, as if the day had found its rhythm again. On the way, she passed the park where the trees whispered softly in the wind. She sat on a bench for a few minutes and let the world go quiet. Birds hopped in the grass. A child laughed in the distance. The sky stretched wide and soft above her. She did not think of herself as brave. She thought of herself as someone who had practiced being calm until it became part of her. But bravery often looks like calmness in the middle of uncertainty. It looks like choosing words instead of shouting. It looks like setting clear boundaries without hate. When she arrived home, her mother noticed something thoughtful in her eyes. They cooked together, ate in quiet comfort, and later, in her room, Amara wrote in her small notebook again. She listed 3 good things from the day. One of them was simple. I stayed true to myself. That night, she rolled out her mat and practiced slow, mindful movements. Each breath was a reminder that strength doesn't always show itself in loud ways. Sometimes it is silent. Sometimes it is the choice not to react with anger, even when anger seems easier. She did not know how the story at school would continue, but she knew this. Whatever came next, she would meet it with the same steady heart. She would protect her peace without hurting others. She would stand firm in kindness because kindness was not weakness. It was a deep kind of strength, the kind that grows roots. And as she fell asleep, the day softened around her, carrying the quiet promise of tomorrow. The next morning began like any other, but the feeling around Amara had shifted in a quiet way. People still walked through the halls with the same rush and noise, but there was a softness in the way some students looked at her. Not pity, not gossip, more like respect mixed with curiosity. Word travels fast in a school, even when nothing dramatic happens. Somehow, the story of that calm moment after school had found its way into dozens of small conversations. Some said she had stayed peaceful even when the air felt tense. Others said she spoke with respect, even when she could have been defensive. By the time Amara reached her locker, a few students she barely knew were smiling at her, like they already understood something important about her. She did not let it change how she acted. She still walked with steady steps. She still kept her voice gentle. But inside, she felt a little lighter. Not because people were talking, but because she had proved something to herself. She had stayed true to her own values, even when it would have been easier to snap. The group that had followed her the day before seemed quieter now. They didn't surround anyone. They didn't stare as openly. They walked through the hall like they were carrying thoughts they didn't want to show. Amara noticed, but she did not judge. She knew that people sometimes made choices they did not fully understand until later. During class, the teacher spoke about respect again, but this time the words felt more specific. Without pointing at anyone, the teacher shared how everyone came to school carrying stories and feelings the rest of the world might never see. We don't need to fully understand someone to treat them kindly, the teacher said. Amara listened, feeling each word settle gently in the room. Later that day, a note reached her asking her to visit the counselor's office during her free period. Her heart beat a little faster, not out of fear, but because she did not know what to expect. She walked down the quiet hallway, the walls lined with soft posters about support and kindness. The counselor greeted her with a warm smile and kind eyes that looked like they had seen many stories over the years. They didn't rush. They asked how she was doing, truly doing, not just on the surface. Amara spoke honestly. She didn't exaggerate. She didn't hide. She simply explained what the past weeks had been like. The whispers, the looks, the moment after school, and her choice to stay calm. The counselor listened without interrupting, nodding gently now and then. When Amara finished, there was a long pause, but it was a comfortable one. Then the counselor thanked her for her honesty and for handling things with patience. They explained that other students had noticed too, and that teachers were becoming more aware. The school wanted to make sure everyone felt safe, respected, and seen. Amara didn't ask for anyone to get in trouble. That wasn't her goal. She simply wanted space to learn, to grow, to belong. The counselor understood this. They spoke about the possibility of a conversation, a guided one, between her and the students involved, not to punish, but to help everyone understand one another better. Amara thought for a moment, then nodded. She believed in words. She believed in change. A few days later, the meeting took place in a small, comfortable room with soft chairs and a round table. The counselor was there. So was a teacher who had always treated students with quiet fairness. And then the students from the group walked in. They looked different in this room. Not bold or distant, just human. Like anyone else, unsure of what to say. For a moment, silence filled the space. Then the counselor invited each person to speak, one at a time. No interruptions, no shouting, just honest words. The others went first. They spoke in halting sentences, sometimes stopping and starting again. They admitted they had watched Amara because she seemed different, and they didn't know how to respond to that feeling. Some confessed that they had followed the group even when they didn't feel comfortable, because they didn't want to stand out. There was regret in their voices, the kind that grows slowly once people realize their actions have weight. When it was Amara's turn, she did not accuse. She did not shame. She simply told the truth in simple language. She spoke about what it felt like to walk through hallways knowing eyes were always on her. She said that she wanted peace, not attention. She shared how she practiced staying calm because she believed every person deserved respect, including herself. She also spoke, for the first time at school, about her martial arts training, but she didn't say it with pride or threat. She described it as a practice of discipline, patience, and inner quiet. "It teaches me not to use my strength unless I have to," she said softly. "And mostly I don't have to." The others listened, really listened, and something shifted again, not loud, not huge, just a small opening inside them. They apologized, not in the rushed, careless way people sometimes do, but slowly, thoughtfully. The counselor guided the moment with care, reminding everyone that true respect means learning from our mistakes, not just saying sorry. When the meeting ended, the students walked out together. They didn't suddenly become best friends. Life rarely works that fast. But there was a new understanding. The tension that had wrapped itself around ordinary days began to loosen. Over the next week, the school made small changes. Teachers checked in more often. The counselor visited classrooms to talk about kindness and how easy it is to forget that every person is carrying invisible stories. There were gentle reminders that silence can hurt just as much as loud words, and that speaking up for fairness matters. Some students started being more open with one another. A few even came up to Amara to quietly say they admired her calmness. One girl sat with her at lunch one day and asked what books she liked to read. A slow, tentative friendship began there, like a young plant pushing through soil. The group that had caused trouble took their own steps toward change. You could see them trying, holding doors open, keeping their voices kind, being more mindful of the space they took up. It wasn't perfect. Growth rarely is. But effort mattered, and Amara noticed. There were still moments when she felt the old nerves rise up, like tiny ripples under the surface of calm water. But she had tools now, breathing, writing, practicing on her mat at home, talking honestly when something didn't feel right. Her mother remained a steady presence, offering quiet support and the kind of hugs that remind you that the world still holds warmth. One afternoon, after school, Amara walked past the park again. The same trees shook their leaves gently in the wind. Children laughed in the distance. The world seemed wide and soft, like a sky opening after rain. She sat on a bench and thought about the past weeks. Not with bitterness, but with reflection. She realized that people sometimes act out of fear or confusion. They see something different and don't know how to react, so they follow the easiest path, even when it isn't kind. But people can also learn. They can choose better once they understand better. That thought gave her a quiet sense of hope. As the sun dipped lower, she took out her small notebook and wrote again. This time, instead of just listing 3 good things, she wrote a whole page about strength. Not the kind that shouts or forces its way through the world, but the kind that listens, forgives, and sets boundaries without anger. She wrote about how important it is to treat yourself gently, even when others don't, and how change, real change, often begins with one calm voice choosing not to add to the noise. When she closed the notebook, she smiled a little to herself. She was still the same person she had always been. Quiet, steady, thoughtful. But now she felt more rooted, more sure of her place in this new world. Not because others finally saw her worth, but because she had never let go of it. The next day at school, she walked through the hallways again. The rush of voices and footsteps sounded almost musical now. The same lockers, the same posters, the same old floors, but a new feeling in the air. She was not invisible. She was not a target. She was simply herself, and that was enough. And somewhere inside, she carried a peaceful truth. The world could be difficult sometimes, but she had the strength to move through it with calm and kindness. That strength did not make her hard. It made her steady. It allowed her to face uncertainty without losing the softness in her heart. People noticed, and slowly, quietly, the school started to feel like a kinder place, not just for her but for others too. It was not perfect. Probably never would be. But every day, in small ways, students chose a little more empathy than the day before. And Amara kept walking forward, not loudly, not dramatically, but with that same gentle resolve that had guided her all along. One steady breath, one thoughtful step at a time. She woke up early on the morning of the school showcase, long before the alarm. The room was still dim, with soft light sneaking through the curtains. For a few minutes she just lay there, listening to the quiet. Her chest felt lighter than it used to. There was still a small knot of worry, but it no longer filled the whole space. She had friends now. She had a plan. And she had learned that her strength did not come from how fast she could move or how hard she could kick. It came from how she chose to treat people, and how she chose to treat herself. Downstairs, her mother was already making breakfast. The smell of toast and warm tea drifted up the stairs. Her mother smiled when she saw her. It was not the tight smile of someone trying to be brave. It was soft and real, the kind that carried a quiet pride. They didn't talk much about the past anymore. They didn't need to. They focused on the day ahead, on the small things they could enjoy right now. At school, the halls were buzzing. Posters for the showcase were taped to the walls. Students carried instruments, artwork, science projects, and gym bags. Teachers moved around with clipboards, trying to look calm even though it was clear they were just as excited as the students. She walked in with her backpack over one shoulder, moving with the same steady pace she had always used. But people noticed something different. Her shoulders were relaxed. Her eyes met other eyes. She smiled first, without waiting to see if it was safe to do so. The group who once caused her the most trouble was already there. They stood together near the lockers, talking quietly. A few weeks ago they might have pointed or whispered. Now they looked uncertain. The leader of the group, the one who used to laugh the loudest, held her gaze and then looked down at the floor. It was a small thing, but it said a lot. She didn't walk the other way. She didn't stare them down either. She just passed by like any other student, like they were simply classmates. That normal kindness made them feel even more aware of how much they had changed too. By lunchtime, the nervous energy of the showcase had spread everywhere. A friend waved her over to a table and saved her a seat. They talked about silly things at first. Who might forget their lines in the drama performance, who had painted the brightest poster, who was bringing the best snacks for the bake sale. The talk slowly turned into something deeper. They spoke about what courage meant to each of them. For her, courage had first meant fighting back. Then it meant staying calm. Now, she thought courage also meant opening up and trusting others again. It meant not letting fear build walls inside her chest. The afternoon passed quickly, and soon the gym was full of chairs. Families sat close together. Teachers walked around with microphones and big smiles. The air smelled like popcorn and new paper programs. The stage lights came on. Music started. Students sang, read poems, and showed their work. Each performance got its own applause, some loud, some soft, all warm. Her part in the showcase was not about showing how strong she was in a physical way. Instead, she had been invited to speak about calmness and respect in everyday life. At first, she had said no. The idea of standing on a stage and telling her story felt too big. But after thinking about it, she realized she didn't have to tell every detail. She could share what she had learned, without shame and without blame. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage. The microphone seemed taller than she remembered. She adjusted it slowly, letting her hands stop shaking before she spoke. The gym was so quiet that she could hear someone in the back cough and then whisper an apology. She started with simple words. She talked about moving to a new place and feeling different. She spoke about fear, not in a dramatic way, but as something small that grows when it is hidden. She explained that she had trained in martial arts, but that the most important lesson was not about blocking or kicking. It was about self-control, patience, and knowing when to walk away. She did not name anyone. She did not point fingers. She talked about how words can hurt, and how silence can hurt too. Then she spoke about change, and how people can learn to do better when they are given the chance. As she spoke, the students who once laughed felt a tightness in their chests. The leader of their group kept her eyes on her hands, twisting her bracelet over and over, wishing she had understood sooner. It wasn't guilt that filled the room, though. It was possibility. People began to understand that strength and kindness didn't cancel each other out. They could live side by side. When the talk was done, the gym was still quiet for a breath or two. Then the applause came, not like thunder, but like a wave. It moved through the seats and across the floor. Her mother wiped her eyes. Her teachers smiled. Her friends stood up and clapped a little longer than the others. After the showcase ended, the gym turned into a busy, happy place again. People hugged. People laughed. People took pictures with shaky hands. She stepped down from the stage and was surprised when the leader of the group who used to trouble her walked up to her. Her voice was small. She didn't try to explain or make excuses. She just said she was sorry, in a way that sounded honest. It would have been easy to walk away, but she remembered what she had said about change. So she nodded and said she hoped they could all do better from now on. They did not become best friends in that moment, but the air between them cleared a little, like clouds moving away from the sun. In the weeks that followed, the school felt different. Not perfect, just different. More students spoke up when they saw someone being treated badly. Teachers started small group talks about respect and boundaries. The gym class coach invited her to help with a short workshop about staying calm in tough moments. She showed simple breathing and balance exercises, nothing that looked dramatic. She reminded everyone that the goal was to avoid fighting, not win one. Her friendships grew stronger too. They studied together, laughed together, and shared small worries about tests and family and the future. They also shared dreams. One friend wanted to be a nurse. Another wanted to paint murals. She talked about maybe teaching one day, not only martial arts but also the kind of confidence that sits quietly inside a person. At home, life became more peaceful. Her mother slept better. They cooked together, turned up the music while they cleaned, and sometimes went for long walks after dinner. They didn't talk about being the new family anymore. They simply were part of the place now. There were still days when old feelings tried to return. A harsh word in the hallway could still sting. An unexpected memory could still make her pulse rise. But now she had tools. She took slow breaths. She spoke kindly to herself. She reached out to friends instead of shutting down. One afternoon, she walked past the practice room where the martial arts mats were rolled up in the corner. She paused and looked inside. It reminded her of where the whole journey had started. She stepped onto the mat and bowed her head for a moment, not as a show, but as a private promise that she would honor what she had learned. Not the moves, the mindset. Later that year, the school invited students to write short letters to their younger selves. She sat by the window in the library, a pen in her hand, and thought about what she would say. She would tell her younger self that being new is hard, but not forever. She would say that some people act unkind because they don't understand, but that doesn't make the pain any less real. She would say it's okay to ask for help, and that real strength often looks quiet. She would remind her that she is allowed to take up space, to smile, to speak, to dream. When she finished the letter, she folded it and slipped it into the box with the others. She didn't feel the need to hold on to it. She was already living the message inside. The school year slowly turned into summer. The days grew warmer. On the last day, as students hugged and said goodbye, she stood near the front doors, watching the sunlight spill across the floor. A few of the students who had once made her life difficult walked past and gave small nods. The nods said, "We see you," and also, "We've changed too." That was enough. She stepped outside and took a deep breath of warm air. The sky was wide and bright. She didn't know exactly what the next year would bring, but she knew this. Whatever came, she would meet it with calm, with courage, and with the quiet, steady strength she had discovered inside herself. And as she walked down the path toward home, her shadow stretched long in front of her, not as something to fear, but as a simple reminder that where there is light, there is also proof that she is standing tall.